We are recording the interview of Ava Leisure. This interview is being conducted by Jennifer Seavey from the Wright State University's Veteran Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio. It is 2 p.m. on January 27, 2016. Okay. So when and where were you born?
Melbourne, Australia, March 20th, 1950.
Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
My parents were Hungarian refugees from Europe after the war. Zeno Ziklis and Ava Ziklis, and they went to Australia as refugees. And my mother worked in a dress shop all her life in retail sales, and my dad was a manager of several different stores, starting with grocery stores all the way up through Sears kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Once we came to the States, of course.
So how did you guys come to the States?
It's kind of a long story. My mother and dad were in Hungary in 1944 as the Russians were coming in. Their families, not knowing each other, each left Hungary in that year just before the Russians moved in. And they went to a place called Passau, Germany. And there they met at the gymnasium at the high school. My father was 18 years old when he and my mother married. My mother was 19. Well, back then in Europe, that was a no-no because it was right after the war. My dad was just a young kid, and they said he couldn't support a wife, and she was older than he was, and technically they wanted them to be 10 years older than the husband so that they could take care of them, be established and all that. So my dad's family disowned him. And because my dad's family disowned him, as refugees, he did not want to go where his family was going. His family was going to America. So he told my mother, who, by the way, at this time, when they went to Italy to pick up a refugee boat, was pregnant, but she couldn't tell anybody because they would have left her. They would not take her on a refugee boat. So she was about almost 9 weeks pregnant with me. And she didn't tell a soul. And my dad said, we'll take the first boat that comes to South America, Brazil preferably, or Australia. Well, as it happened, the Australian boat came first. So they boarded the Sivillard refugee ship and went to Australia. Well, my dad's family decided that after 5 years, when the marriage had broken up, they would look him up and see what they could do for him. Well, after 5 years, they sent the American Red Cross to Australia to look for him. My dad fended that off for several years. My uncle kept insisting that he should come to America and that he would pay his way. My uncle was a doctor, and so my dad, after 3 years of cajoling and, he finally said yes. So by this time he had 5 kids. Yes. Obviously the marriage had not broken up, and so in October of 1957 he came alone. My uncle sponsored him, came to America, left my mother in Australia until January, and then he sponsored her and the 5 of us to come to America.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, that's why I said it was a long story.
But no, that's fantastic. So, okay, who are your siblings?
I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. The next 2 under me were twins. Unfortunately, one of them has passed on. Then I have a sister, youngest, and a younger brother, and they both live in Colorado.
Okay. Has any of them served?
My brother, who has passed on, was in the Marine Corps. My youngest brother was in the Coast Guard.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, all 3 of us served. My 2 sisters did not.
Okay. So what were you doing before you entered the service?
I was a high school student, and I graduated in the top 5% of my class. Went to 5 different high schools, And because I did not become a citizen when my parents became citizens, I couldn't get a scholarship. I was not a citizen. So I got accepted and was going to go to UCSB, University of California at Santa Barbara. Got accepted, everything was fine, until I got a notice from them that said that I would have to live on housing off campus, and they wanted to know how much my parents could afford to help pay for that. And I asked my mom, and unfortunately my mom said $10 a month was all that she could afford. And I knew right then and there that my chances of going to UCSB were now going to be nothing. So the same day that I got that letter, my father had signed up my brother into the Marine Corps. He was not a graduate, but he wanted to join the Marines, and my dad signed him in. He was 17 years old. I was 18. I had already graduated, and he still had a year to go, but he opted to go in the Marine Corps anyway. So my father called home, and he wanted some information. He wanted to know whether I remembered the first address when we first came here. Now this was in 1968, and we came here in 1958, so 10 years. Well, I remembered. I don't know why, but I'm good with numbers. So I remembered the address being 5424 Tamarind Street, and I gave him that information. When he came home, he said, "The recruiter asked about you." And I laughed. And I said, well, yeah, he can ask all he wants. I, at that time, was dating a Navy guy. And my dad said he wanted to know if you were interested in going in. And I said, no. And my boyfriend would kill me, for one thing. And the Marine Corps? I don't think so. He said, but they said they would pay for your college. And that's just what got me. When he said they would pay for my college, I went, really? Maybe I should look into this. So I went down and I took the ASVAB test. But I was basically just graduated from high school, working little odd jobs. I think I was working in a drive-in theater or something, you know. Prior to that, I worked as Barbecue Bills in Palmdale, California, as a hostess. And Little Miss Smiley, they called me, because I smiled all the time. But I wasn't doing anything, and my hopes were set on going to college. So that's why I joined.
Sure. What did you want to do when you went to school?
When I was in school, I wanted to be a lawyer. Okay. Obviously, that did not work out. But, yeah, that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a lawyer.
Okay. So, you served in the Marines then?
Yes.
Were you active duty, or do they have guard?
Duty.
Okay.
Yeah, I was active duty. I went in and saw the recruiter, took the ASVAB test, and he got really excited and said, that's the highest score I've seen anybody get on it. And he said, do you want to go into the Marine Corps? And I said, I need to check some other services. Well, I went to the Air Force, and the Air Force was, in order to get in the Air Force, you had to have your picture taken. And I was a little bit skeptical, because I thought, if you have to base whether you get accepted or not on your picture, I probably wouldn't make it. And I thought that was unfair. So I decided to go back to the Marine Corps. I didn't want Army and I didn't want Navy, so I knew that because I get seasick. So I went back to the Marine Corps, and that's the rest is history. Active duty.
So did you enlist, or?
I enlisted.
Okay.
Yeah, back then they didn't have, women were not enlisted like the guys. You know, they weren't drafted. There was no draft for women.
Okay.
So yeah.
So what was basic training like for you?
Difficult. Difficult, not that it was too strenuous, because I came from a family where my father was a dictator, basically. You know, European, just ruled the house with an iron fist, and basically never told you that he loved you. You know, it was always the bad things that you did that you remembered. So that part wasn't bad. But I do remember a time when I completely forgot my native language, by the way, is Hungarian.
Okay.
And since then I've lost a lot of it, although I've picked up a lot. But back when I was in, there was an incident while I was in basic training when a sergeant came down to see me. I was in 4th week of boot camp, and we were taking a battery of tests. He came up to me and he said, when you get done here, he said, I want you to come through this door, go across to the next building, pound on the hatch till someone answers, tell them that you need to get into the interview line, and then as soon as you get to the head of the line, once you're at the head of the line, then I'll come looking for you. So I finished my test, did as I was told, went across and knocked on the door. No one answered, so I knocked again. I didn't pound, I didn't do anything like that. However, my drill instructor answered the door. She did not appreciate the fact that I had knocked twice. And so she yelled at me and she said, what platoon are you in, private? And I said, back then you sounded off. You sounded off and you said, platoon 10A, ma'am. And she screamed at me and she said, platoon 10A, my platoon. She said, I'll see you in my office, private. Okay? I was supposed to be taking a Hungarian test. So I went in and she said, get to the end of the line. Well, then I had a decision to make. The other sergeant had told me to get to the beginning of the line. She told me to get to the end of the line. She was there. She had already yelled at me, so I did what she told me. I got to the end of the line. In the meantime, sergeant came down. He said, where's my little Hungarian private? And he looks at the end of the line and he screams, at the end of the line, I told you to get to the beginning of the line. Sergeant Westfall just looked at me, my DI looked at me, and she said, recruit, now I have 2 things against you. I will see you when we get back. And the look in her eye just knew I was dead. You know, I was going to get kicked out or something, you know. So I went to the end of the line, went upstairs with the sergeant crying, although I never would have let my DI know I was crying. Forgot every single word in Hungarian. I was so frightened of what was going to happen to me. I thought I was going to get kicked out, and there would go my college, there would go everything. So I forgot everything. They must have thought I was stupid, because as I'm listening to the words, all I could think of was what was happening. I wasn't hearing anything. The sergeant was very nice to me, but anyway. So then, that's not the end of the story, because when I got back to the platoon, I got over the intercom, I want to see Recruit Zickless in my office right this minute. And of course, all the girls in my platoon just put their arms around me. You'll be okay, you'll be okay. No, I'm gonna be thrown out, blah, blah, blah. So I went, I did all my moves the way I was supposed to. We were taught to walk a certain way, click our heels, and stand at attention. My DI's right where you are right now, and there was another DI over here reprimanding another recruit. Her name was Sergeant Diaz. Sergeant Diaz, I heard her say to her recruit, you see that recruit? She said, she did all her moves right, and she's only been here 4 weeks, and you've been here 8 weeks, and you don't even know how to do them yet. My DI said, and this is one of my worst ones. So that just put the fear of God in me even more. I'll bet her table wasn't as wide as this one was, maybe half the size. She pulled out from her drawer a mirror. She came around the table, stuck it right in front of my face like this. She said, look at that face. She said, it's ugly. She said, the only reason you pounded on that hatch twice so the whole Marine Corps could jump up is because you want a man and you're going to be out of here in 6 months. I can tell you that right now because you're that kind of a girl. And she says, if you look at that ugly face, nobody's going to want you anyway. I stared straight ahead, didn't blink a tear, didn't do anything, because the last thing I wanted was for her to know that this upset me. She was just trying to break me, I think. And had I cried, I might have been out. But I didn't cry, didn't do anything. And she said, "You're going to be out of my Corps within 6 months, I can tell, pregnant." Well, that's not what I came in. Although I can say at that time, that's what a lot of girls went in for, you know, to get a guy. But I was in for a college education, and I was not going to let anyone disrupt that. So anyway, after she was done with that, she said, "Get out of here. I don't even want to see that ugly face anymore." So I did my moves. I went out into the hall, and all of a sudden the tears just poured from me, poured. And I walked back to my barracks, and all the girls are, "What happened? What happened? What happened?" And I told her, she said, "I was ugly, and I was going to yell." It was awful. But I remember that because I think it's the first time in my life that I took something from someone that I knew wasn't true, and yet I was not going to let her break me. I was not going to let anybody break me. And when I first went into the Corps, I had dark hair. It was streaked blonde right over the top. So anytime Sergeant Westfall looked down her line of recruits and saw that blonde streaking on the brown hair, she just knew she just knew that Recruit Ziklas had something to do with whatever she was screaming at. And so I got screamed at a lot because of, I know it's only because of my hair, because I was scared of my dad, so I was scared of my DI, scared of everybody. So that part, that was the worst part. I mean, we got cussed at, we got called names by the male DIs and everything. The hardest part for me was running. I almost didn't make it. But the girls, the camaraderie in our platoon, they just kept running beside me going, "You can do this, you can do this, you can do this," you know, and I made it through. So it was just everybody around, you know, helping us do what we need to do. "You can do this, you can do this," you know. And the fact that I wanted the college education, that's really why I was there. And I just couldn't see myself being thrown out of the Corps, ashamed, you know, that I had not lived up to any expectations. I was a straight A student, and yeah, so that's the hardest part. I was used to all the haranguing, the name calling and all that, because my dad did that all the time, you know, so it wasn't anything that I couldn't handle. So that's it.
That's good.
Wow.
So, do you feel that you had, by the end of basic training or boot camp, that you had learned a lot from the drill sergeants?
Oh my gosh. I can tell you that the one thing I wanted more than anything was for Staff Sergeant Westfall, my DI, not Sergeant Esplin, who was the assistant, my DI, to put those emblems on my uniform. I was so, so proud to have become a Marine and to have gone through all that and made it, you know. So, oh yeah, I learned a lot. I learned that I was stronger than I thought I was, you know, and I was. And throughout the rest of my life, I think I've kept that.
Okay, that's good.
To an extent.
Okay, so what was your military occupation?
I was payroll clerk, dispersing.
Okay.
Yeah, 3421. And I graduated top of my class. There were 4 girls. All the other girls, 3 other girls, graduated somewhere between the middle and the end. There were about 26 guys and 30 in our class, and I was consistently first. There was a young man who was consistently second, and he tried his best to beat me, and I wasn't trying. It wasn't hard. I don't like math. I don't know why I can remember numbers, but I just don't like math. So I don't even know why I got put into that, except that I couldn't remember Hungarian anymore. Anyway, at any rate, I graduated top of my class, and I had a friend. His name was Johnny. He was short like I was, and he had a girlfriend back home, and he and I kind of palled around, even though we weren't supposed to. We weren't dating. We were just kind of palling around. And when I came in to take the final test, he said, "If you got any sleep at all, you're going to beat this guy, so don't even worry about it." And I hadn't even studied. Well, this young man had stayed up all night, and he ended up third in the class. He'd always been second, and because he'd stayed up all night, he couldn't take the test. He ended up third. First two got meritorious promotion and got to choose, I think the first five got to choose where they wanted to go for their duty station. Unless you were a woman.
Really?
Women were not allowed to choose. The guys were allowed to choose, but the girls were not. But I did get my meritorious promotion. So 4 months I was in E3 already, which was totally amazing. And I'd only been E2 for 1 month. So
that's amazing.
yeah, and the Lieutenant Steele, I'll never forget, he said, there's only one other girl that has ever come out top in her class in the history of the Corps. And she's a lieutenant now. So I want to see you as a lieutenant. Well, what he didn't tell me is that you have to be a citizen to do that. Yeah, and since I wasn't a citizen, and by the way, I'm still not, because I wasn't a citizen, I would never been able to go to OCS. But that's okay, because I wanted my college. That was all that mattered to me.
Sure. Okay. So where was your first duty station?
My first duty station was Quantico, Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Okay. First thing that was asked, what was your rank in class? My girlfriend's rank was like 28, and my rank was first. Two of us went to Quantico. And because I was first, I didn't have KP duty, but she had KP duty. So I skated through KP. Never had KP. Never. Just because.
Now
yeah.
what is that?
KP, peeling potatoes in the kitchen.
Okay.
Kitchen patrol. I never had kitchen patrol. So first duty station was Quantico. But the thing about Quantico was that I did not like it. Unfortunately, there were, at that time, and now in retrospect I think about it, I guess it's a different world, but back then I was not interested in becoming a lesbian, and there were a lot of women there that were caught fooling around with each other during the night watch, and I absolutely hated it. I hated it. I almost went AWOL because I hated it that much. I volunteered for Vietnam and was turned down because
Why?
they said no women were allowed unless you were a nurse in the Navy, and Marine Corps didn't have nurses. So no women were allowed. However, because I volunteered for Vietnam, they waived my yearly requirement to be stateside before I could go overseas. There was another young lady who had been given an assignment to Okinawa, which was the stopping off place for those going to and from Vietnam. And she was married. She didn't want to leave her husband, so she turned down the orders. And they came to me after 9 months, asked me if I wanted to take those orders. Had it not been for that, I might not be here. I might have been back in Australia, because I called my dad just before I got those orders, and I said, I'm going AWOL. I cannot stand this. I can't deal with these girls, you know. And my dad said, go to Australia, they can't touch you, because I was a citizen.
Okay.
Yeah, so if I hadn't gotten those orders, who knows where I might be. I might be back in Australia and not have the family I have, not have the college education. Who knows? You know, so little things just kind of worked their way in, and I got orders to Okinawa. So I went home for 2 weeks and then got sent over to Okinawa, which was not part of Japan at the time, to Camp Smedley D. Butler.
Okay. So what were your duties over there?
Same thing, payroll clerk.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where I picked up my E4. After 9 months of being meritorious Lance Corporal, I picked up E4. Angered one of the girls who had been in E3 for 3 years, because she just kept getting passed up. And I picked up E4 in 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
And she just thought that was, well, 9 months after Lance Corporal. And she just thought that I was the worst person in the world. I took away her stripes. You know, that's, But I picked up rank easy. I don't know why, because then, 10 months later I was an E5. So
what was your typical day look like?
Typical day, Marines coming in and asking about their payroll, and I just would use my adding machine. We didn't have calculators or computers or anything there. Use my adding machine and, and then take their pay record to the officer of the day, whoever that was, probably Major McGaldy, and then he would sign off on it, and then we'd give him the money. Sometimes we would holster up, so we'd take guns and we'd have to distribute cash to some of the people out at different posts. So, but I would wake up in the morning, and I lived in Camp Courtney. Camp Smedley D. Butler had several little camps, Courtney, McTurious, and honestly I don't know the others because those were the two that I was concerned with. I lived on Courtney, but I worked on McTurious. So I would take a taxi cab to Camp McTurious and work there. And that's where I met the man who I would later marry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he worked next door. He was an electrician. So.
Okay. So while you were over there, did you witness any combat?
No.
No?
No. I just witnessed soldiers coming back from combat. I had a very good friend who was in the Navy who lost his best friend in Vietnam, and on his way back we got together. We were from the same town, and he was my best friend back home, so I got to see him, but no combat over there.
Okay.
B-52s were taking off, but of course they were telling the American public they weren't. The American public didn't know what was really happening during Vietnam except what reporters were telling them, and sometimes that was slanted.
Sure.
Yeah. And then I was there when 3rd Marine Division came back from Vietnam, the whole division.
Oh, okay. That's good.
No combat thing. Women at that time were not. It's just recently when women have been allowed combat anyway, other than nurses.
Were there many women where you were at over there?
There was a fleet of women, I believe, at the Air Force Base, and I don't know how many were there that were women Marines. We had about 30 where I was stationed, about 30 women.
Well, at least you had a
Yeah.
handful there.
To about 10,000 men.
Oh, well,
The odds were good. Better for the girls than the guys.
That's true. So, you spoke about the camaraderie.
Yes.
Do you still keep in contact with anyone?
No, unfortunately, no, because after I got married and I got pregnant, I got booted out. So
Really?
No, yeah, because back then you couldn't stay in the Corps if you were pregnant. So that ended my career.
Sure.
I do, however, still consider myself a Marine, and I have joined the Marine Corps League, and I associate with those in Springfield who are also Marines. And I know quite a few women Marines who served. In fact, my daughter-in-law is a woman Marine. She was in the Corps. And then I do a lot of volunteer work, and one of the head of the volunteers was a woman Marine as well. So I keep in touch that way. But other than that, I don't keep in touch with any of the comrades that I went to school with.
Okay. So while you were overseas, what did you do for recreation?
Mostly just going to the club. There wasn't much to do in Okinawa. Sometimes I might go down to, once I got married, I went sightseeing a lot because my husband would take me. But before that, there wasn't a whole lot to do. You might go down into the town, but even there, most of the bars I was told nice girls didn't go into, so, never went into anything like that. Most of the time, just to the local on-base club, Smedley D. Butler,
Okay.
NCO club.
Okay. So how did you stay in touch with family and friends back home?
Phone calls and writing. Phone calls mostly.
How long did it take for letters, though, when you wrote?
I'm not sure. I know I wrote my dad a letter when I wanted to get married because I was only 20 years old, and I had to write him a letter to get permission to get married because of the Japanese law. So I would say it would take, you know, a week, 2 weeks to get a reply, or maybe almost 3 weeks to get a reply. But most of the time I called. You know, I would call and talk to them.
That's good. So how long did you serve in Okinawa?
Let's see, I got there in May of 1969, April of 1969, and left in June 1970. So just, maybe I got there in July. I spent 11 months.
Okay.
11 months, a little over 11 months overseas. Because when I got married in Japan.
Okay.
And then I had a church wedding in Okinawa. And once I got married and got pregnant, my time was over.
Okay, so did you come back to the States after that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, came and got discharged at Camp Pendleton.
Did you fly or was it by ship?
Flew. I flew everywhere. I flew to Okinawa, I flew back from Okinawa.
Didn't you say you get seasick?
What? I get seasick,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Yes, but that's not why. That's just the way it was.
Okay.
They give you orders, they pay for your flight.
Okay. Okay.
I know, I remember coming back from Okinawa being sick the entire trip on the flight, and they quarantined everybody on the flight. World Health Organization, I went straight to the bathroom, was throwing up, and World Health Organization person came and said, well, we quarantined everybody until we find out what's the matter with you. So I was sick on the plane, I couldn't eat, couldn't do anything. And I looked at him and I said, I know what's the matter with me. And he said, what's the matter with you? And I said, I'm pregnant. He started laughing, and then he walks out and he yells, it's okay, nobody can catch it. So, yeah.
That was good.
So it's kind of a funny story, but I wasn't able to eat for 3 days after that trip. Everything came up, water, everything. Yeah, it was awful.
Oh, sure.
But anyway, had to stay in my room.
So when you came home, how were you received by your family and the community?
Oh, well, my family was very proud of the fact that I was in the Corps. I had an uncle who was in intelligence during the Korean War in the Marine Corps, and he was the proudest of me. He wasn't really my uncle, he was my dad's cousin. He was my second cousin.
Okay.
And he was the most proud of everybody because he had been a Marine himself, you know, and had hoped that I'd gone into intelligence like he did, but of course I couldn't remember any Hungarian after my little episode.
Right. Surprised they didn't let you to try and retake it, though. Wasn't there a way for that?
I don't know. I don't know. I probably should have, but 18 years old, you know, you're listening to her tell you that you're going to be pregnant in 6 months and out, and how ugly you are, and nobody wants you anyway, and then, you know, and you're just going, just get me through this, get me out of here.
Yeah.
Funny part is, my DI became my best friend. She was stationed in Okinawa. She didn't remember me, of course, because she went through lots of recruits. But she knew my husband, and when I left to come home, she said she'd help take care of him, you know, make sure that he was okay, and you know, that kind of thing. So we re-met in Okinawa, and she was an adorable person. Sergeant Westfall she was wonderful, you know, but she was horrible as a DI. Not horrible, but you know what I mean. It was scary. She was skinny, tall, lanky, and you just knew she could just break you. You know?
It's funny.
But she was a nice person. Yeah.
Well, it's good that you got to meet her
Yes.
in a different setting.
Right, absolutely.
So, but how were you received by the community?
Nobody really said much of anything. Nobody even mentioned it. I know it had been in the papers that I'd returned. But you got to remember that I left from California. My parents when I got out, had come to Colorado.
Okay.
Okay, so this was a neighborhood I didn't even know. So nobody knew who I was anyway, you know. And back then, I didn't really talk about being in the Marine Corps because people were not very receptive to anybody who'd been in the military service back then. So it was kind of, let's not mention it to anybody, you know, because I didn't want to be hated and called a baby killer because I was over in Okinawa, and of course nothing like that ever happened, but the point being, we just kind of just left it hush-hush.
Yeah, it's understandable. So how did you readjust to civilian life?
Well, I don't know that there was much readjusting because by that time I was pregnant and I was adjusting to pregnancy life, you know, and then having the baby. And readjusting wasn't an issue.
Okay.
Yeah, because like I said, I was back with my parents and my dad had a strong hand anyway. So, yeah, it was okay. And then when my husband came home and we moved back to California.
Okay. So what did you guys do when you were in California?
When he came back, I was like 8 months pregnant. And we lived in Glendale. And he worked for the television studios, KTLA Channel 5, where you'd make sets. He was a carpenter, makes an electrician and things like that. And he made sets for them. But it was union work. And we were just beginning that quota system where you had to have so many blacks, so many Hispanics, so many whites. And there were often times when he didn't get called because they didn't have their quota. They had to find a black person or a Hispanic or Asian or somebody, you know. So he decided to go back in. So we were out of the Corps, I would say within 6 months he was back in. He wanted back in.
Okay.
So then I became a military wife. And that was easy because I was used to the military. So.
And you already knew what to expect?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the first man that I married was a wife beater. And he wanted to go to DI school. And I said if he did, that I would leave him because they weren't allowed to hit recruits. And I knew that if he came home angry and frustrated that he'd take it out on me. So I said, you do that and I'll leave. So he became a recruiter instead. He went back to Okinawa for a full year. And that's when I decided that I didn't want to go back to an abusive marriage. And ended up telling him that when he came back I wanted a divorce. Of course he called me from Okinawa and said I had another man and that's why I was doing this and blah, blah, blah. So when he came back, 6 months later I left. He told me he would change. He didn't. I left.
So what did you do after that?
Came back from Washington, D.C. where we were stationed. Was headed to Colorado where my sister lived. And she had told me that I could have the whole basement area, me and the kids. Stopped in Springfield where we had lived for a while because he was stationed at Wright Pat. And a girlfriend said, just come and stay with me, you know, especially if you're still thinking that there's a chance the marriage will get back and be mended. And I had thought that. I had thought that perhaps he would realize, stupidly, what he had missed, you know, and that he would change. So anyway, I stayed in Springfield and then 2 years later ended up finally divorcing them. And marrying someone else.
What did you do while you were in Springfield?
I had been going to school from the time that my son was born in 1973. I started back in school. Graduated in the top part of the class, straight A's, from Arizona Western, and then transferred to Wright State. And then I was working on during the divorce and the separation, I was working on my master's degree.
So what are your degrees on?
My degree is in Well, Associates of Arts was just in general classes. Then I got a BA in English, and then I got a MS in education, teaching actually.
So have you been teaching?
Yes, I've been teaching for 30 years. Yeah, there goes my dream of being a lawyer. Yeah, I taught for 30 years. It's not something I wanted to do at first. When I married my second husband, he had 3 kids. We had 2 more. So with my kids, his kids, and our kids, we had 7. And we couldn't make it on one paycheck. So I was going to school. I was working at odd jobs. And then finally, one day I came home from school. His dad and he had been talking to me about being a teacher, being home all summer. It was an 8 to 3 job and nothing, you know. And I knew better because I taught at Wright State for a couple years as a TA, and I knew the amount of work there was in it. And I told him, I said, if you want me to do this, that's fine, but understand that it's not 8 to 3, that it's a lot more hours that I'm going to devote, because I'm a very meticulous person and a perfectionist. So we talked about it, and they said, yeah, go for your degree. So I went back to UD and got my degree, and then started teaching.
Okay.
Yeah, I started at Troy High School, and then transferred. They were in money problems, and they didn't rehire me. They went $2 million in debt and had to drop people. So then I got picked up by Springfield City Schools, and that's where I was for 28 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Teaching English in the high school.
So how did your military experience affect your life?
My kids say, my students say, I'm very military oriented. I'm a no-nonsense person. If I say don't talk, don't talk. You know, I tell them I was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. Don't give me any guff. You know, when I was teaching summer school, if the kids were late, I'd make them do push-ups or go to the principal's office or whatever. And they always invariably chose the push-ups.
Sure.
Okay. I think it taught me to be self-reliant. I think it even though I was weak in my marriage, because I stayed with the man for 8 years, he was a Marine, and so I was very drawn to that idea that I stay married, and I was committed to my vows. I think once I broke away from that, I think I had a better handle on things in my own life. I knew I could take care of myself, you know. My father doesn't believe that women can do anything, or my father didn't believe that women could do anything. He's proud of the fact that I did, but he didn't believe women should have the role in society the equal role. Women were never equal. My mom totally depended on him. And so I learned that from him. So I took care of my husband and met his needs instead of meeting mine. And then married another Marine. Something about Marines. Married another Marine, and then he left after 25 years. So I think I was too independent. You know, he was old school. He wanted a woman who would do his bidding and be, you know, beneath him. Mm-hmm. And I was not willing to do that. Never will. Sure. And so now I've been divorced for 10 years and happier than I've ever been.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you. So how's your military service impact feelings about war and the military in general?
I can tell you that it irritates me when people say bad things, negative things about our servicemen. It also irritates me when people don't seem to care about what happens to a disabled vet or what happens. The person I'm seeing right now had prostate cancer from Agent Orange. I know a lot of Marines that have come back sick, you know, and they're critical of why they're getting the extra money or whatever. I can tell you that when I was married in that 25 years, my husband lost his job and for 14 months couldn't buy a job during the recession, the Reagan years in the 80s. Couldn't buy a job, and if it wasn't for veteran services, I would have lost my house. So being a veteran has its advantages, and it has impacted me. I'm very proud of the fact that I'm a Marine. I mean, you ask anybody, in fact, I got a hat that says Woman Veteran, you know, because most people will see on my license plate it says Marine Corps, and they'll say, who's the Marine? And I'll say, I am. Really? You know, because you don't associate women with Marines, you just associate the men, the few, the strong, the proud. Well, we're the fewer, the stronger, the prouder. You know? So I think it impacts everything that I do. It has impacted who I've become. While I was in, there was a time when I was almost raped. And just being a woman during those times, and I know women go through it even now, and I'm thinking, you know, we got to do something about this. We got to change something. We got to do something because this is not right. Guys, when I was young, all thought I was there for one reason, and I wasn't that kind of a girl. I wasn't. I was raised in a strict Catholic family, and you know, the person I married was the first person I'd ever been with, you know, and there's a whole mentality out there of people who think women are doing it just to get a man. My DI said the same thing. They think that women do it because they're butch, or women do it because, I don't even know. I just know that today, when I talk about being a woman Marine and how proud I am of that, it makes my heart, even today to even talk about it, makes my heart flutter a little bit to know that I went through the toughest boot camp that they had. You know, I mean, I can't imagine the Air Force, the Army, or the Navy doing what we went through. You know, I mean, they don't today do what the Marines do. So, yeah, I'm very proud. And plus, I also like the fact that the Marines have always been known to help children, Toys for Tots. You know, I joined the Marine Corps League because I wanted to help with Toys for Tots. Okay. And there was a chapter in Springfield the Marine Corps League was in charge of. So I joined the Marine Corps League for that reason.
Okay.
And now I'm treasurer of the Marine Corps League detachment in Springfield, so it keeps me busy. I've been commander of the Veterans Organization, the Veterans Council. I was commander for 3 years. It's a part of my life. Being a Marine is part of who I am.
Okay. Are there any other organizations that you volunteer with?
Oh yeah.
Huh?
I'm with Kiwanis. I'm the advisor for the Key Club at Springfield High School, so I'm busy with that. I help at the Soup Kitchen, I help at Second Harvest, I help at St. Vincent de Paul Food Pantry. We raise money for Pennies for Patients, which is the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. We raise money for St. Jude's. We raise money for cystic fibrosis. So all that is part of my service back to the community. It's just, I'm still not a citizen, and part of the reason for that is because back when I got out, I got a little bit upset with the government. I was offered a job doing the same thing the military signed me up for, dispersing. They kept the job open for 3 months. I took the civil service exam, and I don't even know how I did. All I got was disqualified, right across, not a citizen. And I thought to myself, I can serve 2 years of my life, and you're going to disqualify me from what you trained me to do because I don't have a piece of paper that says I'm a permanent resident. But it kind of, it made me think twice about, is this the kind of government that I want to be associated with? And then the other thing was I would have had to renounce my Australian citizenship, and I didn't want to do that.
Okay.
So I didn't. Now I'm thinking about becoming an American citizen. I'm probably more proud of this country than anybody who was born here, because people take it for granted. But when you come in as an immigrant, you know, you speak a different language. And essentially I spoke, you know, when I came from Australia, I spoke a different language, even though it was English. Half the time nobody understood me because I had an accent and because I used different words. And I could speak a different language as well, you know, Hungarian. So you learn to appreciate, you know, the finer points of where you're living. I've been back to Australia many a time, would love to go back and live there, but my children are all here, and my children are all natural-born citizens, so that's why I'm here.
Okay. So what message would you like to leave for future generations who will see this video?
The reason I went into the Marine Corps is because I wanted something. It wasn't a man. It wasn't, you know, medals and things like that. I wanted a college education. And what I want people to take away from this is you live in a country where college education is available to anyone who wants it. You just have to find a way to get it. My way happened to be the military. It happened to work out fine for me. Perhaps the military is great for other people. I really think everybody should take a 2-year stint in the military. I think it would make people realize the country that they live in is one of the greatest countries on this earth. And it will make people understand what it is to serve others. Because now my life is about serving right now. I'm retired. I've had 30 years in teaching. I'm retired. I'm serving the community, or at least trying to. And I want my children, my grandchildren, to carry on that tradition. And by looking at this video, I want people to understand that service to the country is a great way to show and to give back what the country has given to them. And I firmly believe that this country is probably one of the finest countries in the world. Even though I'm not a citizen, I'm going to be probably becoming a citizen. But even someone who's an immigrant can have an impact. And my impact on the world, I hope, will be a legacy to my children. And if my children can leave a legacy of giving and of service to God and country, that's all I ask for.
Excuse me, there is a message for you.
My phone tells me there's a message for me.
Okay. So is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed that you'd like to add?
No, I don't think so. I can honestly say that the 2 years that I spent in, not quite 2 years, 1 year, 8 months, and 22 days, that the years that I spent in helped make me who I am today. And so knowing that, it was definitely worthwhile. Definitely worthwhile. I have pride, I have, you know, I have resilience. I can bounce back from any situation. And I love this country.
Okay. And one last question.
Sure.
So how are you a part of the Honor Flight in Dayton?
Because I was in during Vietnam era, they were calling on Vietnam War veterans, and the guy that I'm seeing knows that I was in the Marine Corps at the same time, and he was in Vietnam, and when they contacted him, he asked if I could come along and be a part of it because I was in as well. As soon as they heard I was female and that I was in the Marine Corps, they jumped at the opportunity. So the most amazing thing I've ever been through, most humbling, the most humbling, because while I never would have expected a reception like that when I came home in 1970, to see that reception now just filled my eyes with tears, and to know that so many people now regret what our country did back then, you know, regret the fact that they didn't welcome us home with open arms, and that they called us baby killers, that they called us, I still believe that there is a need for armed forces. I think under all circumstances, our men and women in the service need to be taken care of when they get out. Absolutely need to be. They should have access to VA, all of them. I don't. And most veterans don't. If you make a certain amount of money, you can't have access to any VA. They should, I know they get extra points on civil service exams, things like that, and I was able to buy my military service in order to complete my 30 years as a teacher, because the 2 years at Wright State didn't count. So I believe that all veterans should be taken care of, and their families, It breaks my heart when I see someone struggling and they've been a vet, and I think to myself, why isn't anybody helping? I'm going down next week to the VA hospital with another member of the Marine Corps League, and we're going to visit some wheelchair-bound vets, hoping to find someone who needs a home, because there's a man down there that's going to build a home completely free for some veteran who is wheelchair-bound. So that's our object next month, is to go, or next week rather, to go down there and find a veteran, so that this man can build him a house for him and his family, or her and her family, whatever. Doesn't matter who it is. Every veteran should hold a high place in society. And honestly, I believe everybody, young and old, should take a 2-year stint. Because I think it would make them a better person.
Very true. Okay. Well, if you have nothing left to say.
No.
All right, then that concludes our interview, and thank you for your service.
Oh, you're welcome.